So hello, everyone. As Brian just mentioned, my name is Julia Barrett, and I'm the Director of Customer Insight at Effective UI. Our practice is particularly focused on understanding people, their needs, their goals, and so we can, in turn, create products and services that garner adoption. We, of course, think that by understanding people and putting their needs first, we can create things, digital tools that work for people as opposed to the other way around. So before we get started with the content, why did you come to the conference in person? All of this content will be available in a matter of weeks online, but you're here in person for some reason. Go ahead and introduce yourself to the person next to you and share a little bit about why you're here in person. I'll give you about 30 seconds and I'll remind you to switch, and then we'll come back. What's that? Oh. So don't forget to switch. Okay, and let's come back. Go ahead and wrap it up. So let's talk about what you guys said. Go ahead and shout out a couple things that you guys said. Why are you here in person? Conversations, great. Okay, got it. Meet new people.
Dedicated time to learn this stuff.
Got it. Okay. Inspiration, great. So I speculated a little bit and thought that you might say things like, you know, who wouldn't want to come to Toronto in January? We got some snow. Of course, you know, perhaps you're looking for a new job, networking, and along those lines, it carves out time for you to engage with new content. But we all probably agree that we're here because there's something about being in person. There's something distinct. We got on an airplane. We had our companies, or we paid for a conference to be here in person because there's value being in person with people. It's something about how we are wired as human beings. Now let's talk about our applications. I'm a design researcher, so I spent the last couple days talking to some of you guys and interviewing you. And I asked 3 questions. The first question was, what applications do you engage with the most? What are the positive impacts of those applications on your in-person interaction? And what are the negative impacts of those applications on your in-person interaction? So what is the positive impact of applications on your in-person interaction? You said, Anthony from GE, he said maps. I think he was referring to his wife, although maybe I'm projecting here. We don't have to fight about which way to drive. The news, being up on what's happening. I'm able to be up on things and have an opinion in conversations. Who can relate to that? Okay, a couple of you. And Christine mentioned that Instagram allows her to keep up to date with her close friends. Eric from TD mentioned for keeping up to date with what's going on email is crucial, and Facebook provides that too. But what about the negative impacts of our applications on your in-person interaction? So Anthony mentioned, I'm checking the news or sports when I should be playing with my kids, or I should be listening to someone, but I get distracted. The in-person interaction is degraded because I'm not 100% there. Who can relate to that? I know I can. Okay, got it. And Heather, also from TD, she said, I don't see as many people in person because I think I've caught up with them on text. So I think I don't need to see that person. The in-person interactions become fewer and fewer between. And Eric, also again from TD, mentioned Facebook is a time killer. There's time where I should be talking to people and it degrades those interactions. So this talk isn't about why you came to the conference or about abandoning the online experience for in-person interaction. But I believe that we're on a really interesting and exciting cusp where applications can enrich in-person interactions. As it is today, most applications are designed to suck us in and away from the world around us. Applications like social networks, applications like the ones that we use for work. But we're starting to create applications that enrich our in-person interaction. Applications that allow us as humans to do what we do really well and allow for the computer to do what it does really well. But I need you guys as the world-class interaction designers to accomplish this shift. I'm the design researcher, but you guys are the genius designers, and I invite you to take on this cause as well. My intention of the talk is really to shift the momentum of applications, to allow them to reconnect us with the physical world and the people around us. To have you guys, again, as the great interaction designers of the world, to look for opportunities, to have the applications you design create connections between people in person. Not only through applications like social networks, but also those in-person interactions. So, a little context about how I became interested in this. I've been in this field for 10 years in some capacity or another. And before that, I studied human-computer interaction. And I thought it was fascinating to look at applications and look at problems and see how we could create applications or services or products that could address the problems and really address people's needs and behaviors. And I was fortunate that I was able to translate that into a career. But after about 7 years in the field, I found myself discouraged because I found that every application was taking me and the people that I was working to inform the applications that we were designing, took people away from their in-person interaction and the people around them. And I was talking with Joyce Sykes, my former boss. Some of you may know her from CMU. And through a conversation with her about yet another iPhone application, I think during this conversation I was slumped over a plate of Mexican food at a Mexican restaurant in Denver. And through this conversation about this iPhone application that we were being asked to inform, I realized that we were on this cusp of a really interesting time where our applications could actually enrich our in-person interactions. And that was something that was really interesting to me. And I saw this opportunity to be able to augment and enrich our interactions instead of just sucking us in. I, around the same time, was also flipping through Dan Saffer's first book, Designing for Interaction. And in that book, he reminds us that interaction design is about facilitating interaction between people. And despite the fact that my practice is about understanding people and their needs and their goals and creating products and services that address their needs, I had lost sight of this. I'd lost sight of the fact that even when I order something from Restoration Hardware and say, hey, you know, please send that to me. I'm saying, please people, put that on a truck, send it to me, and you know, maybe even make more of them. I think that's pretty fantastic. Hopefully it looks good in my house. If not, I'm going to have to go through shipping it back, which isn't very pleasant. But you know, I think that when we look at how our applications can enrich our in-person interaction, we can deliver on interaction as being about facilitating interaction between people in a really rich way. Why this matters? This matters because what people are good at, and also, frankly, what computers are good at. Applications mostly don't enrich what we're hardwired to do, at least in part, and that is interacting with people in person. In Don Norman's book, Things That Make Us Smart, he reminds us that we're really good at things like inventing things to solve problems, reading emotion, and he also reminded us, in addition, that we're geared to interact with each other in addition to other things. And when we interact with computers, which we do more and more often, we're not interacting with each other specifically in person. So what computers are good at? Don Norman reminds us, again, amongst other things, that computers are good at storage and speed. And I'm going to add here also stories. Computers applications can be great at illustrating stories, animating stories, in ways that we're not great at, or ways that take us out of conversation. So let's talk about some examples of in-person social computing applications. So when I talk about in-person social computing applications, those are the applications that allow us as people to do what we do really well in person, but also leverage what applications are really good at and what computers are really good at. So this first example is from the Nordstrom Innovation Lab. They identified this opportunity, this challenge that people were having when trying on sunglasses. They were trying on a pair, taking them off, putting them down, having to remember what they looked like, try on another pair, remember what they looked like, to try to find that pair of sunglasses that aligned with who they are. And so what they did is that they created an application for a tablet that allows the salespeople to work with customers to find the right pair of sunglasses. So the application allows the salesperson to take a picture of the customer with those sunglasses on, and then that customer can take the pair of sunglasses on and put on another pair and then take another picture. So then in turn, the customer can see what they look like and compare side by side those sunglasses. And what this allows is for offloading the cognitive burden of having to remember what the customer looks like in that pair of sunglasses. Allows the computer to do that, and instead the customer and the person from Nordstrom, the customer service person, sales representative, can do what they do really well and still be in that conversation, still be engaged in person with the customer. So I was in line yesterday for lunch, and I was talking to Ryan from 1323. He is an interaction designer, amongst other things there. And when I was talking to him about my talk, he shared with me about Obama's mobile campaign application, and I had to add it because he shared with me about how it was designed for conversation. It was designed for the canvassers to be out there and in conversation, in dialogue with people as they went door to door, and was designed to be for enriching the conversation and designed to really be for people in conversation and support them in that kind of dialogue. This is a photograph from some user testing that we did for a financial services application. I'd love to be able to share more with it. Unfortunately, I can't. But these applications are about enabling the financial advisor to be able to be in conversation with their client and augment and enrich that interaction by being able to illustrate concepts that are otherwise challenging to explain and challenging for the client to explain. And what we found in our research is that although they're not supposed to, oftentimes financial advisors will reach for a yellow pad of paper to do some illustrations. They're a little tentative to do it because they're not supposed to for compliance reasons, and they'll try to draw out some concepts to explain things about pre-tax investments and post-tax investments. How many of you guys have ever met with a financial advisor and found some of the concepts they were talking about a bit confusing? All right. I think more hands went up that time than actually people that met with financial advisors. But you know, this is an example of how these kinds of applications can enrich and augment our in-person interaction and hopefully offload the cognitive burden of having to explain things and for the client to have to imagine things that are oftentimes pretty abstract and things that we don't think about every day, and allows for in this case, the tablet to illustrate those stories and bring those things to life in a way that allows the client and the advisor to stay in conversation. This is an example of a lobby experience. We were asked to come up with some ideas for a kiosk that was in the lobby of an apartment building. And this company had added these kiosks in hopes of having them occupy people when they were waiting to see an apartment. They didn't want to have people leave as they were, perhaps the employee of the apartment complex was showing somebody else an apartment on a busy weekend. And what we found in doing some research with people that were looking for apartments is that this kiosk was a pretty foreign interface. People don't really interface a lot with kiosks these days. We have so many devices, but we found that people really shied away from this. And unfortunately, when they did interact with it, there were a number of usability issues, so it was compromising their ability to sort of retain people and have them stick around as opposed to really enriching their experience. But it got us thinking about how, because there is a conversation that's really critical to the process at hand, it got us thinking about how perhaps how an application could perhaps enrich and provide and augment the in-person interaction. So perhaps in this case, somebody waiting to see an apartment can look at an application and interact with it a little bit on their own, understand the neighborhood, a bit about the building, about the residents, and then it can also enrich and augment their experiences they were looking through an apartment. So it could, even as they're with the representative from the apartment, they could have that experience enriched and augmented. So my last example here is games. And you could argue that games have been doing this for a long time, and they have. They've been augmenting our in-person interaction. But by leveraging, in this case, this is another tablet example. These don't have to be tablet applications. I think there are other opportunities for us to augment and enrich our in-person interaction when appropriate. This is obviously Monopoly, and it's been, the iPad has been added to the experience so that people can have the story of the game illustrated and brought to life and animated. This also combines a physical and digital interface, and these kinds of applications don't have to. I think this in particular makes the interaction that much richer. And I think that there's an opportunity in this case in particular to further enrich the storytelling elements of this application. But it does a really interesting job of augmenting and furthering our in-person interaction. It does, for better for worse, take the responsibility of banker off the table. So your little brother can no longer steal from the bank, or there's no longer that option of speculating if somebody's stealing from the bank, which may or may not be a good thing. So now I'm going to talk about 4 design principles for in-person social computing applications. And instead of me just jumping in, I'm going to give you a chance to guess and just think about what 4 design principles might be for these kinds of applications. I talked with our designers to come up with some of these and to learn a little bit about what makes sense in terms of augmenting and enriching an in-person interaction and conversation. And design principles in this case, I'm thinking of them as like the North Stars or the guiding concepts. So go ahead and just take a few seconds and just guess what they might be. You can just write them down. If it will be on the honor system, if anybody guesses all 4 of them, they can have my drink tickets for the next happy hour. So I'll give you like 20 seconds. Maybe less, maybe 10. You guys strike me as good at writing quickly. Do you guys need more time? Okay, I'll take that as a no. So the first one is be polite in conversation. these kinds of applications that augment and enrich our in-person interaction should frankly be quiet for a lot of the time. They should allow people to do what they do really well and allow them to interact in person and have the conversation, but come to life when it's critical to get people from point A to point B in the conversation such that people don't have to imagine and take on that cognitive burden of having to imagine a really complex concept or imagine a story that's maybe more delightfully brought to life through an application, through a story, through a tablet application. This next one is illustrate a story. This is about bringing it to life. And it dovetails nicely with the first one because this is really about offloading the cognitive burden of having to imagine and think about what a story or a concept might be. Coming back to this example of the financial advisor. The financial advisor, when we did our research, we found he would draw this picture of 3 buckets to really illustrate the concepts of pre-tax dollar investments and post-tax dollar investments. And it was critical to what they were explaining. And they did it with every client. But it was a bit complicated. And just complicated enough that it was something that we saw we could illustrate and bring to life in a way that was a bit more accessible through in this case, this is again a tablet application, and allows the people to stay in conversation but really still have the benefit of the illustration of the story. Likewise, you don't have to worry that people are understanding the concept or that they're imagining it correctly. So this next design principle is deliver interaction for all parties. And this is this picture cracked me up. It's a photograph of a number of cats playing with an iPad application, and we have an onlooker up there in the corner. But this is something I see overlooked a lot in these kinds of applications. Organizations oftentimes want to just put a presentation on a tablet. They want to rush to have an iPad application. So they just want to get like what could otherwise be a keynote presentation on a tablet. And that bums me out because it's really overlooking what these kinds of applications can be really good at and how they can really make good use of the time of the people that the people from your organizations meet with. So this I see, and just creating a presentation on a tablet is a really missed opportunity. Things like tablets actually physically lower the barrier compared to like a laptop in these kinds of dialogues. And we can, although in our circles tablets have garnered a lot of adoption, they're still really early in their infancy, and we can, as the designers, can really define how they're used and define how they're used in in-person interaction and how they can possibly enrich it. Delivering interaction for all parties, this, of course, isn't often overlooked in things like games. Games, of course, if you're designing an application that requires multiple players on, say, a tablet, chances are you're not overlooking the actual interaction for all parties. So this next one is customize the content for all parties. And this isn't something new in interaction design, but this is these kinds of applications are important. It's important to customize the content for all parties because this is, again, something that's often overlooked in these kinds of applications. And by providing customized content, we can enrich and make the content more relevant and compelling to the people that have to engage with it. And as a result, when we have people that are engaging with and paying attention to and the content's more relevant, we learn more. So this is an opportunity for people to be able to learn more as a result of leveraging these kinds of applications. So a couple contextual considerations. So first of all, informing in-person interaction or in-person social computing applications. In-person research is a must. I know it sounds probably biased because I'm a design researcher, but for these kinds of things, really the first thing you have to look at is if there is a conversation that is critical to the process or the goal of whatever problem you're trying to solve. So again, if there's a conversation that's critical to the problem or the goal that you're trying to address. So if there is a conversation, then we have to identify if it makes sense to augment and enrich that interaction or if it's not appropriate. So that's something that needs to be distinguished through research. Also, I say that in-person research is a must because there are oftentimes multiple parties involved in these interacting with these kinds of applications. There are different types of roles. There's a social dynamic at play. All these kinds of things are in play that aren't necessarily in play when I'm sitting at my computer interacting with Facebook. So it's really important to look and understand the conversation. I'll talk a little bit about mapping the conversation in a second. Look at what's being drawn. I touched on this a bit before. Look at what people are drawing in that conversation. What kinds of stories are they trying to tell and maybe struggling to tell as a result of not being a fine artist or having to take away time from the conversation to draw something. And last but not least is really a follow-on up to the first one, and that is conduct research with all parties. That means understanding the needs of the users from all aspects and understanding not only the people that are perhaps the representatives from a company, but also the customers and how they're involved in that conversation. I touched on this a bit. Sometimes these applications, of course, don't make sense. Those kinds of things could be, tasks. Arguably, computers suck us in for tasks. And so these kinds of applications aren't something that's designed to really complete like a task like we would an email or something like that. And of course, the wrong space or the wrong audience. If we were trying to augment dating with an application, I don't think that would necessarily be appropriate, even though that in-person conversation is critical to the success or failure of that relationship. So just a couple things about how to design in-person social computing applications. I'm realizing I'm harping on this a bit, but if you're not a design researcher, if you're not comfortable with it, I recommend making friends with somebody that is, or you can do this yourself. And really, just what you're looking to understand is how the conversation goes, who's involved in the conversation, the goal of the parties involved in the conversation, the roles of the people involved, and where people are asked to imagine something. So how the conversation is constructed, who's involved, the goals, the roles, and where people are being asked to imagine something. I also recommend mapping the conversation. Of course, every conversation is going to be different, but this is an example of a conversation map that I made for the sunglasses application. So the far left is actually the end. So the end, it might be about finding a pair of sunglasses that are aligned with who I am. This is from the customer's point of view. Compare multiple pairs of sunglasses on my face. Browse multiple styles. And and of course, you have to find the sunglasses store of the sunglass section of the store first. So, and then on top of that, you can map what kinds of things are going on in the dialogue that are relevant to those major buckets. But then as you see these major buckets, you can see what kinds of things could enrich that experience. Jerome Van Heel, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. I know he's here, so if I'm not, I'll probably hear about it. He wrote an article for Johnny Holland that was about how Aristotle's story framework can apply well to interactive design. So he talks about looking, these are the ones I think are particularly relevant, but look at what is the plot, who are the characters, what is the theme, what is the diction, and what are the spectacles. So what is the plot? That is the goal of the application. He talks about how this is really about what's the goal of the application. So For the sunglasses one, it could be about finding a pair of sunglasses that are aligned with who I am. The characters are, of course, the users. He also says the brand. I know brand is a very hot topic amongst some UX communities, so I won't go into much depth there. What is the theme? That's how the product is different. How is it different from maybe another application that's designed to do a similar thing? Or maybe it's, how is this different than the paper collateral that exists? What is the diction? That's the language. And I'm reminded so frequently how important diction is to our customer experience. I was, this coffee shop, there's 2 coffee shops that I go to. One uses, has a Square account, and the other one has ShopKeep. And both of these coffee shops are fancy coffee shops. So the coffee's already expensive, but it's delicious, so I go there anyway. The one that has the Square account, the choices for the tip are $1, $2, $3, and I don't know if it goes any higher than that, but those are my only choices. And so I'm paying for this, 8-ounce cup of coffee that's like $3, and then I'm being asked to tip another $1. And ShopKeep asks me to, I can tip 15%, I can tip 20%, I can enter a dollar amount. So it says something about, what is expected of the user. So again, although we play a lot in features and functionality, diction is so critical, and the language of our organizations is critical to the experience. And I could go on this. United is a very interesting one to me for some reason. What are the spectacles? And those are the features and functionality. So we're coming up on 12:30 here. Just a quick recap here. I think that we're here at a really interesting opportunity where we can enrich our in-person interaction with applications so that we can do what we're really good at as humans, and we can leverage computers for what they're really good at, instead of getting sucked in and away from interacting with the people around us. And I invite you guys, as the world-class interaction designers, to join this cause and push the organizations you work for, not only to design applications that perhaps take us away from the people around us, but look for ways that we can enrich and augment our in-person interaction in a way that's meaningful and delivers value. This I see as an avenue where we can enrich our in-person interaction and give us our in-person interaction back. Thank you.